Okay, good evening, everybody. So we'll call the meeting to order. I don't have it at 7:15. And we'll begin with the adoption of the agenda for the governance and priorities meeting Wednesday, November 16th, 2022.
Move as presented.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dean. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Adoption of the minutes, item 3.1. Did anyone see anything from October 20th, 2022 in the minutes?
I'll move the minutes be adopted as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Coachman. And any discussion on that? All in favor? Okay, that's carried. And we'll move on to no delegations, no business, no new business. We have presentation on asset management. Good. I'm looking forward to this. Mr. Frank.
Your Worship, Kara will take you, Miss Kennedy will take you through this presentation.
All right, so good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. So tonight we have a special guest presenter, Bruce Lee from Catalyst. And we've been working with Catalyst preparing our policy and strategy, which you guys saw at the end of August and September when you approved the policy. And now we're going to be presenting the roadmap and the plan. Those are the last of the two documents that we applied for funding on with the FCM MAP grant application. So just wrapping those up. So Bruce is going to go through the plan first and then the roadmap. And then we're hoping for your endorsement on the roadmap for the next 3 years to kind of set the steps forward for us. Ask questions, I guess, throughout the presentation with Bruce and for sure at the end as well. Yep, so I don't think there's much else I have to say, then Bruce is going to do the presentation.
Awesome. So thanks for the introduction, Kara. My name is Bruce Lee. I'm here from Catalyst. Here to provide as much expertise as possible on the asset management plan. If I can get the presentation up. So today we're just going to go over what the asset management plan is looking like and what the roadmap is looking like for your endorsement.
Try again.
Okay, awesome. So what we have on the agenda here, we're going over the road network, water network, sewer network, storm network, bridges and bridge culverts, and then recommendations. I do want to preface that saying that the plan is a snapshot of what asset data is there right now, and there will be further iterations down the line when more information is inputted. Then we're going to go over the asset management roadmap as well. It's going to go over the FCM readiness scale, the advancement of the competencies, and then opportunities to advance the asset management program. So we'll dive into the road network here. There's been significant data collected over the course of the last few years on the roads in the road network with the rural road study being done. However, the supporting structures within this network are where there are some gaps in the data. I want to note that the current replacement costs for signs, supporting structures, and guardrails are now zero. This is not because they're free, but because there isn't enough data to model replacement costs for them yet. I do want to mention and highlight the gravel roads right there. These replacement costs are to model the total value of the road network, not the amount of roads that need to be replaced. This dollar amount takes up a lot of the road network replacement cost total, and you can see that the majority of it is the gravel roads. On the next slide here, there's a breakdown of the road network in terms of condition. You can see that there's a lot of green. The darker green there is the excellent condition. You can see that the majority of the road network is in excellent condition or in good condition. That doesn't need to be replaced. The none category are roads with replacement costs without a condition associated with them yet. There is a plan in place to collect the condition assessments on these remaining roads, as well as a plan in place to repair the critical and the poor roads up to a higher quality of condition. I have a few more graphs breaking down the types of roads in the county. So you can see almost all of the gravel roads are in excellent condition. There are a few paved and oil road segments that are in critical and poor condition, but you can see that they don't add up to 10 kilometers even. Like I said, there's a plan in place, which roads are being prioritized based on recommendations from Public Works staff.
Can I, excuse me, can I ask a question just really quick? So we've got a pie chart with values and things like that.
Right.
Is there a, from Public Works, do we have a roadmap where these roads are exactly in the
Yep.
municipality?
Absolutely, you can look into the wet map software and you can see exactly which roads are need for replacement and where the problem areas are.
Okay.
Next up here, we have a 20-year ARF. So ARF stands for an asset replacement forecast. This one was created for Woodlands County based on what information is available. What we mapped out is based on estimated useful life and install dates as well as surface upgrade dates. So the expected useful life pushes these roads to a certain useful end date and then they're set for replacement. ARFs are built to help plan and help to and be a resource for financial planning into the future. You can see what road segments are due for replacement in the next few years, what are overdue for replacement, and then budget accordingly. Any upgrading and maintenance that is done can push these dollar amounts into the future as these replacement costs aren't required in the current year. We also have level of service that was created. This is just a flat baseline that we have right now. Obviously, there will be council input based on what you want the level of service to be. The nice thing about level of service for roads, which is the example here, once you have a level of service for one road, you have level of service for all of your roads. You want to be able to make sure you're driving safely on them. So criteria sources and the criteria measurements and indicators should be the main things to focus on in level of service. So which roads you want to get data from and collect that criteria from, and what kind of criteria you are looking to get, what kind of data that you're looking to get to supplement level of service. I can't quite read, yeah, go ahead.
Can you just give me a better understanding of level of service when it comes to a road?
So level of service is the quality of a service that you want an asset to provide to your ratepayer. So in terms of a road, you want to make sure that the road is reliable, safe, and maintained properly. You want to be able to drive at the proper speed limit. You don't want to be swerving. You don't want to be. You don't want roads to go down for maintenance very often either. Things like that. Every asset type is going to have its own level of service that's going to be dictated by recommendations from the council, recommendations from the asset management group. It's a collaboration of how you want that service that the asset is providing to look for your ratepayers.
So is it purely a subjective or is there an objective measurement?
There is a baseline of level of service that's rooted in logic. Everything should make sense. You don't need a road to be, doing your taxes for you or anything. You don't need a water valve to be cutting your lawn. Things like that don't make sense. Generally, the assets that have level of service statements should make sense for what you want it to provide, and then any increases in level of service are dictated by subject.
Audrey, you want to supplement that?
I'd just like to add that the definition of level of service for asset management is not the same as level of service of every road being graded once every 2 weeks.
Sure.
They're two separate.
Yeah, got that. Yeah, thanks for that clarification.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions right now? I can't quite read the slides there, but you should be able to see them in your documents. This is just the baseline. There will be collaboration just to figure out what you want your criteria to be, and this will be something moving forward for as many asset networks possible to set those levels of service standards. So moving on to the water network. The water network has significant data inputted into the database. This is a network that's nearing the level of completion that we're aiming for of the basic and advanced inventory. So you can see that there are all of the counts accounted for. The replacement costs are modeled for the majority of these assets, as well as condition, baseline level of service. These are all starting to blossom in the water network. I do want to address this water network ARF. The reason that it looks so funky right now is because of how these ARFs were built. They were built with install dates, expected useful lives, and where these assets fall in terms of replacement. Because a lot of the water network has long expected useful lives of 50 years, 75 years, if they were installed anywhere in the last 50 or 75 years, they're not going to fall within the next 20 to be replaced. We have the data, or an Excel sheet that shows, I think, 2,086 as about $12 million worth of replacements, which doesn't really make sense to have that now. But as condition assessments are done and more accurate data is inputted into the system, it's going to spread out those costs along where it needs to be. Which assets need to be replaced sooner, which assets need to be replaced later, based on usage rates and levels of service. Is there any questions about this ARF? It looks very weird. The ones that exist right here, the water mains there, are the copper service lines in hamlets right now. I do believe those fall under the 20-year window, and a few water valves that are in critical condition. Those are the ones that fall in, I think, 2027 there. Everything else has fallen outside of that 20-year window, and if we expanded this 100 years, you'd see all of them lined out. So the sanitary network, just as robust as the water network. All of the assets have been accounted for. The majority of the attributes have been compiled and kept track of. There is no 20-year ARF, as all of those replacement costs are fallen outside of that 20-year window. Again, with condition assessments being done, more accurate data, some might fall into that 20-year window to be replaced, but as of right now, the sanitary sewer network has a lot of data, if not all of it, and is not needing to be replaced from a data level. So the storm sewer.
I have a question.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
With regards to replacement cost, do you guys have like an inflationary factor that you utilize?
So our replacement models are specific for certain asset types. We don't have them for every single one, as it's hard to gauge how much a building's gonna cost. That's very subjective. But a lot of the asset types that we have modeled replacement costs for. They take into account provincial variations, inflation, any regional discrepancies like supply relations to discount any asset types can be integrated into that replacement cost. So the more information you have, the easier it is we can model these replacement costs for you. This is just our baseline that we update fairly regularly. I want to say biannually, we take a look at as many replacement costs as we can, any new information that's out there, as many reports on how much a water valve costs to replace, how much a water main is per length, per material type. We do as much research as we can to make sure these replacement costs are up to date.
I should just add one thing too about the sanitary network. So it doesn't have an ARF for it right now because it's showing outside of the 20 years, but we do have some of our camera work that we're using for condition assessment, and we need to manipulate that more and kind of determine which lines, we do have a couple that are in critical condition, and so theoretically they could be showing up in that 20 years. We just need to finish doing some of the modeling and decide how critical they have to be to fall into that model, if that makes sense.
And is the detail enough that we know, for example, there's a valve at a certain place that needs to be replaced, or it went sideways on us, or we're gonna preemptively replace it? Do we know what size of line that is, what type of valve it is? We can actually bring that valve to the job. We don't have to dig it up and then go, oh, it's one of those.
So later on, we're going to see a big table with as many attributes as we can. The asset management group has done or inputted the data with a lot of diligence, and a lot of the information is in there. As much information as possible for attribute fields, so like diameters of water valves, mains, material of mains, where they start, where they end, lengths are all in there in terms of information.
Okay.
So next up, we have the storm sewer network. This is where things start to change. As you can see, the majority of the replacement cost is centered around the storm sewer culverts. The storm sewer culverts have quite a bit of history and as well as a future plan in them. So this one is specific to the storm sewer network. You can see that there is a majority of these assets that don't have a condition associated with them yet, but they do have a replacement cost modeled for them. With the culverts that have been collected in terms of data, any in excellent condition, useful life has been extended by 30 years. Any in good condition, their useful life has been extended by 20, and any in fair have been extended by 10. This is to push those replacement costs down the line. They aren't needed, they're in very good condition. So this is an ongoing project, collecting information on these culverts, making sure that the condition is up to date and the ones that are in need of maintenance and upgrading are accounted for. On this map, you can see where the information has been taken for the culverts. This is in terms of location and condition assessments. In the first area, in the north side here, a lot of the culverts have been located, and now condition assessments just need to be done on them. This map won't show the ones without condition assessments on them, as it's specific to condition assessments. The second area here, the plan is to locate and then do condition assessments on them. So once that's done, you can see slightly here where there is color variation on these culverts. You can see where the excellent ones are, you can see where the poor ones are, and the critical ones. So this can be done with any amount of, or any type of asset in the network. You can just put on the filter and then map out exactly where they are and visually see where the problematic areas are. I do have a few more examples down the line in the presentation of different asset types, but this is a good example of how a map is going to look once condition assessments have been done. Any questions about the map? Okay. So here is where you can see how upgrading and maintaining the assets that need them is going to divert costs down the line. As the install date and expected useful life is a very static number, a lot of these replacement costs have been centered around a few years in particular, and with more information, with prioritization of which assets need to be upgraded and which assets need to be replaced, you're going to be able to diversify these costs down multiple years and spread them out so it's not so financially burdening on one specific year. We have some examples here from some of the information that's being taken down. I don't know how to go about collecting information like that or how to even assess the diameter of that vertical culvert, but they're doing very good work. They're in the county.
So the one on the right, that'd be in good condition, right?
And then we have some hardworking staff making sure that all that information is accurate. They're in the field doing the best that they can in collecting this information so we can make good decisions of investments down the line.
Not claustrophobic, huh?
No.
It's a good thing you guys rescued that dog when you were in there.
Lance made a lot of friends this year.
Is he doing the assessments?
Yeah.
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 Diameter, woof. All right, so the bridge and the bridge culverts. This network is, I think, the closest that I've seen any network to being complete. Engineers were brought in for condition ratings and replacement costs. All of the assets have been accounted for, and attribute tables are full. So what this can do, it can be shown here in the next slide, what the ARF can look like. This is for the next 20 years. You're able to see exactly which assets need to be replaced, are upcoming to be replaced for operation and maintenance. As each year comes and goes, what you need to prioritize for the upcoming years can be supplemental in budget decisions.
What's that?
There's a lot of money in that chart.
I can't see the last year. Is that 2043, the last year?
Yeah. These are all 20 years down the line. Any questions about the bridge and bridge culvert network? All right. So for buildings, parks, and recreation, this is a network that is a little bit lacking in terms of data collection. I say that because the other networks are so full in comparison. What needs to happen are install dates, condition, expected useful life, and then further down the line, replacement costs of these assets. In comparison to all of the other networks, this is one that just needs a little bit more attention in terms of data collection. So I know I've mentioned a lot of what needs to happen in terms of data collection. We've mapped it all out here for what's full, what's missing, to what extent is something full, where data is applicable. And this is only a fraction of the attribute tables that exist. So this table exists in the plan and will be updated down the line. The far right 2 columns are risk and level of service, which are goals to be completed in the next year. So hopefully that'll start filling from red to green. I want to take attention to the top 4 rows of the road network. So these are the supporting assets in the road network, the guardrails, support structures, signs. You can see that not a lot of information is collected on them other than just the location of them. Moving down the line, the water, sanitary, and storm sewer networks are very much filled with green. There are a few gaps in there where you can see exactly where those gaps are in terms of data collection. Right at the bottom there, for buildings, mobile equipment, and recreational features, those are the networks that I talked about last, where some data collection does need to happen. Within the asset management group, they have made a point to make sure that the mobile equipment is an asset type of its own, to make sure that all of them have their own separate set of information. Any questions about this table? Obviously, we weren't able to fit all of the attributes on there, but we wanted to be inclusive as inclusive as possible. So there is more information available in the database for specific asset types that pertain specifically to that asset type. Are there any questions about this table?
I think we're good.
All right, awesome. So some recommendations moving down the line, moving forward for the plan. So 1, utilizing the documents and updating the program as it grows. The more you learn about asset management, the priorities will shift and change. Once you collect all of the data, the priority will no longer be data collection, it'll be data maintenance and making sure that it's all up to date. 2, adopting the roadmap, which we'll cover soon in terms of short and long-term goals and initiatives. 3, consolidating all the information you can into one database. So on the asset information side, it would be collecting all of that information. On the operation and maintenance side, it'd be SOPs and standards of practice for what's going on out there and what is the best way to do it that works for Woodlands County, and making sure that's all formalized and documented. So if I decided I wanted to be Public Works tomorrow and work for you, I would have a foundation to go off of and learn from, rather than following and shadowing somebody for a year before learning how to do everything. The 4th point goes hand in hand with 3. Collecting data is no small task, but prioritizing which information is more important than others right now in terms of your short-term goals and your long-term goals. 5, defining level of service statements for each asset type and specify deeper for your critical assets. So each asset has been associated with criticality, and there is a list in the asset registry that's been built out of which assets are critical within each network. Criticality just means the functionality of the network is hinged on these critical assets. If one of them goes down, the network sees major delays and stops of usage in the service that it provides. So all of the critical assets have been labeled and mapped out. So setting the level of service for critical assets can look a little bit different in terms of higher quality service and making sure they don't go down, and making sure all of the guards and barriers are there to make sure that they don't go down.
That would be like, when you're saying that, you're talking a major bridge, right? A major
Yeah.
bridge would
So-
also affect all the other assets around it.
Exactly.
At the same time.
Or the main road that all the neighboring roads connect to would be the critical asset in that sense. The main water line that provides water to a quadrant of the county versus one neighborhood, right? The criticality of the assets, all the assets are not equated the same. And the asset management group has done a lot of work to make sure that the critical assets have been labeled, and working with department heads and managers to make sure that everyone is on the same page in terms of which assets are critical.
And they are listed in the plan, the ones that we have so far. We just don't have a slide for them.
Yep.
Just a question on the water network that's linked to another municipality. Is there a,
And all the assets that are in the database are assets that you maintain and you take care of. If it's providing service to another municipality, there are borders where we'll keep track of everything up to that border, and kind of past the border is where you would collaborate with them. I can keep going. Yep. All right, so 6, this is to start conducting risk and level of service assessments. Once you've set those levels of service and for all of your asset types, starting to collect the data. How is the service being provided? Are there any, I'm losing the word. Are there any disruptions to that service? What risks are there that exist that would stop the service or pose a threat to the physical asset? And starting to collect this data and input it so you can have a higher level source of information for your database. 7, so shifting towards shifting towards what to do with new data. This is adjusting your estimated useful life based on condition assessments and cost models with new information. So if there's something brand new that comes out and changes the way that roads are maintained, we can apply that to your models and change the amount that it would cost to replace these assets.
So EUL is estimated useful life?
Estimated useful life, yeah. The other side of that, collecting condition assessments can change estimated useful life. If an asset has been not utilized as heavily as expected, the expected useful life might be much longer. Or if an asset on the other side is utilized a lot more than expected, the estimated useful life might be shorter. And just being able to have an accurate estimate of when you need to maintain it, when you need to replace it if necessary, things like this will come with information. 9, evaluating which assets should be diversified as complex and dissected. So a feature of the AMP software that Woodlands County has is that you're able to have a parent asset that's able to diversify into multiple different assets. This is great for buildings, much water treatment plants, the bigger assets that aren't, a brick fell off and we got to replace the whole thing. Every single part of that asset is going to deteriorate at a different rate. It's going to be maintained and upgraded at a different rate, at a different cost. So being able to separate all those moving parts and look at them individually will be a priority. Figuring out which assets to do that for, and then doing it for those assets should be something that you should look at down the line, because a water treatment plant is not easy to replace as a whole, but being able to replace one section of it or maintain one part of it or upgrade one part of it is something much more tangible and approachable. Yep.
How automated is the system with regards to the assets themselves? So say you've got a PM system, preventive maintenance system on assets, and you miss a cycle or something. Does that instantly update, or is that somebody has to go in and log that information and adjust?
As long as right from the start you set what that lifespan should look like, it'll tell you. So if you have an expected cycle of 10 years, it'll come up as in the forecast of 10 years of it's upcoming 5 years down. If you're 5 years away, it'll be 5 years away, and you'll see the specific asset there in the replacement forecast of what needs to be there and how much it costs.
Okay.
So it's just setting it up. That's the main thing. The more detailed it is, the easier it will be down the line. Any questions about that? All right, and then 10, always training, continuing training, investigating new options for municipal staff and council on fundamental principles, looking at new grant opportunities. I know the big thing for FCM right now is natural assets, so waterfalls, trees, quadrants of wildlife, things like that. Being able to maintain them and document these. There are a lot of grants out there. I read about one, I think 2 months ago, about zero emission vehicles for public works. If you wanted a fleet of Tesla trucks, maybe that could be a possibility funded by FCM. Not sure how they would run up in Woodlands County, but there are a lot of grants out there, and just always being able to look for them and finding opportunities to, spend money that isn't yours, is from the government for your own organization, is always a priority. All right, I think that's all I had for the plan. Are there any questions about the plan as a whole? anything that you would like to go back on and touch.
I have a question for Kara. How's the like the usability of the software? Does it require significant training, or is it fairly user friendly?
So far, it's been pretty good. Like Lance has been able to collect all the data in the field and upload. He takes the measurements and puts those in pictures, usually the inlet, outlet, and then sort of a road picture. So we have those, and then we set the condition criteria. So we have like a list of probably like 10 questions that he's asking, and he does a few questions for the inlet, the outlet end, like how much rust is on the barrel, how, I guess, if it's, the end is damaged at all. All those things are recorded, and then he comes up with a final number, a 1 to 5 rating.
Okay.
So we're able to change the questions for various asset types to whatever we want the question to be for the criteria. And we can upload those in ourselves, link PDFs and whatnot, yeah, so.
I've got one question here. I almost don't want to ask this, but the you've got, and this is on page 19 of our PDF, or page 17 of 90 of the asset management presentation that we've got here. So you're looking at 888 kilometers of road, gravel road, and we only have 1.5 kilometers that's poor, 2.9 kilometers that's fair, 19.6 that's good, and 938 is excellent. That's 97% excellent.
So that's for the gravel roads, I think, that you're looking at.
Yeah.
Yep. So we did the rural road study, not this summer, but last summer.
Mhm.
So that's when that data was collected. So are you just surprised by how much is in like good condition, or?
Yeah, based on the calls kind of deal, the service tracker, so.
Yeah, and I think with the gravel roads, it's hard because they're graded all the time, so it changes so quickly for the condition of them on the surface. So we collected the surface condition, I guess, is what you're seeing as excellent, and then we also collected all the ditch depths, the side slopes, the crown of the road, all those. So those type of features wouldn't show up, I guess, in that excellent category. So yeah, I don't know how, like, I don't know how to explain that.
I guess, well, so you're saying that the road condition could go to poor, basically, in a matter of a couple of weeks with a good
And then
rain.
Lee with the grader can
But-
come along and fix it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but if the slope is good, the ditches are good, all the rest of it, we need 2 passes with a grader and we're back to excellent again.
Yeah,
Is
and
that
we
the
did-
idea?
Yeah, and we found quite a few roads where we've, the ditches, we've identified if they had less than half a meter for the ditch, so we have a layer that we pulled out for that. And then also the crown of the road, we pulled out a layer, I don't know what percentage we used, I think it was I'm not sure what percentage, but we broke it down in categories so we have different layers so the guys would know to go, and those are the roads that we need to work on the crown, those are the roads that maybe we need to ditch in the future. But as far as the surface, it changes, like, yeah, someone could go down it with a big heavy truck, and so the gravel ones are hard for the condition rating, for sure.
I
Just 'cause
appreciate the answer, that's perfect.
I guess the question is it a fair statement to say the structure of the road itself is in good condition? Is that a fair statement?
Well, no, because I think the condition that you're looking at when we're giving that condition is strictly the surface. We're looking at all the surface criteria for that. So that would be the surface at the time. So not like, are you thinking structure like side slopes and things like that?
No.
Yeah,
So that's not captured,
it's captured, but it wouldn't give you
not
that,
in this.
it wouldn't give you that excellent rating. If that,
No.
You'd
yeah.
have to pull that out specifically.
Yeah, I'd have to pull that out specifically.
If
He was
you're
just looking at,
I do believe this
Surface.
takes into account everything, and then averages the criteria. So it is one criteria set if the slope is terrible, but if the rest of the road is very good, we don't want that to pull down the rating of the road as a whole. But like Kara was saying, there are separate layers and criterias that we can filter out and look at specifically. So of the hundreds of kilometers of gravel road, we can see exactly which ones are in critical condition for slope specifically, or crown specifically, or that need ditching specifically. This is just a general idea of the overall condition of the gravel roads. based on all criteria taken down.
We're good.
All right. All right, so now on to the asset management roadmap. The roadmap is dictated by 5 FCM competencies that reflect on any asset management program. They're listed here as policy and governance, people and leadership, data and information, planning and decision-making, and contributions to asset management practice. They each have 3 subcategories that I won't go through each one, but they all supplement the umbrella competency, and every opportunity should look to increase or improve one of these competencies and level them up. So FCM uses a leveling system anywhere from pre-level 1 all the way to level 5. I do want to mention that these levels are not created equally. It is much harder to start an asset management program and start collecting data than it is to maintain an asset management program and keep up a good one, which is loosely what the levels correlate to. So the 1 to 2 range is building it up, and then the 4 to 5 range is making sure your staff are up to snuff to maintain this level of program. So here I've taken down some of the opportunities from the roadmap built for Woodlands County for some examples of what leveling up is going to look like in terms of some of the opportunities that are there for the roadmap. So we'll take a look at policy and governance first here. We go from collecting baseline data on current asset management practices, and one of the opportunities that Woodlands County is looking to do is establish performance measures to monitor asset management progress, outcomes, and benefits. So you can already see the difference from the previous statement to the final statement. All of these final statements are opportunities within the roadmap that are looked to be completed within the next 3 years. So we can take a look at one snippet of the roadmap here. We can see the line right there of, I can't read it, establishing performance measures to monitor asset management progress and seeing the benefits. In the roadmap, you can see the year that it's looking to be completed, who will be leading it, internal support from staff, any external support, and whether or not it's ongoing. Some of the opportunities will be ongoing that should be kept up from, thank you so much. That should be upkept past the 3-year roadmap that looks onto the next 3-year roadmap or 10 years down the line, as these are culture items that significantly should be rooted within an asset management culture. So you can start seeing each of these line items. Evaluating performance measures for critical assets is a priority over all the other asset types. Criticality or critical assets are integral for each network to function, so they take priority in terms of data collection. All right, so secondly, we'll look at people and leadership. The first line here is that council knows that resources should be dedicated to explore asset management. Woodlands County is aiming to have council champion it as a core business function and have approved funding for asset management roadmap activities. I do want to say that as a council for Woodlands County, you've done so much for them, and they work very hard for what they have produced, and they want to make sure that there is benefit for Woodlands County. It's one of, if not the most support I've seen from any council for a municipality's asset management program, so I do want to give you thanks for that, and I do want to see where the Woodlands County can grow in terms of their asset management program. So you can see it here on a line item for having council champion asset management, and it is an ongoing thing. The reason it's here as a line item is for the endorsement of these roadmap activities, seeing them, adjusting them, and moving forward together on a one-page basis. On to the next competency, data information. So you can see a previous level is we have some asset inventory data, and the goal that Woodlands County is looking to achieve is consolidating all of the basic inventory of all assets and then working on advanced inventory for life cycle assessment. Having an advanced inventory and then further on life cycle assessment, you're going to be able to see costs associated with upgrading, maintaining, installing, salvage and disposal, anything down the line over the whole lifespan of an asset, and to plan and budget accordingly. So here we see the completion of both a basic inventory and an advanced inventory. Down here we have some line items for life cycle assessment, such as operation, maintenance, rehabilitation, disposal and salvage, and then install and replacement costs of assets. Level of service is something that will be supplemented with all this information. Down here, establishing that level of service for critical assets, as well as capturing level of service for these critical assets is shown. Yeah.
Quick question, it's maybe slightly off topic for this, but with regards to, so we've got our asset in the condition that has been determined of that asset. We're gonna determine a level of service for that asset. How do we utilize like essentially resident feedback or additional feedback against, so the asset management program has determined a road to be of good value or a good condition.
Right.
We've determined a level of service for that road, but now say we're getting 15 complaints a day or a month on that road. Does that affect the status within the asset management program for that road, or how does that feedback, that real life feedback affect the asset management program for that asset?
It should supplement the discussion and it should spark conversation. If you deem a road to be in good condition and used at a proper level of service, and then you're getting 15 complaints a day, that's obviously something that should be looked at and then adjusted accordingly.
So we would adjust our level of service for that road?
Adjusting your level of service,
Okay.
or adjusting the standard of maintenance for that road, depending on what the problem is from your ratepayers. If they say, this road is in great condition, but the road is in not great condition. There's one big pothole there that's always been an issue, but the one pothole doesn't deem the road to be in critical condition. That can be addressed accordingly on a case-to-case basis.
Okay. Thank you.
I just want to add to that too, when they did the road assessment, they did intersection to intersection. So they did an average for the length of the road. So like Bruce said, the odd patch might not show up because they gave an overall rating.
All right. So because they didn't
Bruce.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, let's say you have a road, you're doing an overall, and there's, let's say it's a mile long, and there's 200 feet that's really bad. How do you,
So when the assessments were done, it was based on the segments were either intersection by intersection, any turns, or on a 1 mile basis, 1.6 kilometers. The recommendation was taking a 30-meter segment that represented the road segment best as a whole to evaluate. If there were problematic areas, they can be addressed individually. But the evaluations were done on 30-meter segments for each larger segment. If there is a 200-meter patch that is particularly bad, it should have brought, that is a significant amount of road that's in poor condition, and I feel like that would fall under the criteria that would push that road to be in worse condition. Based on road defects, they are gauged differently. Cracking is done on a percentage of the road. If 200 feet out of a mile, I don't know what percentage that is, anything over 20% wouldn't have gotten a score better than a 2 or better than a 3. So it would have pushed the condition down quite a bit if the defect existed.
but there's no way to get an accurate,
We do have a note section, and it would have been based on assessor competency, who was collecting the information. They can upload up to 5 pictures per assessment. So if there was one big pothole, taking a picture of it and marking it down and writing in the notes, road's great, there's a bad pothole here, and all that information would have been stored if that information was taken down.
so basically it's just on the input.
Right.
Did we capture?
We would have captured, we created a layer called observation, so if there was something that was really bad, then Lance would have put a point in, and we captured it that way. And a lot of times too, we did find like odd things, like a piece of a culvert ripped up or something, so things like that, Lance automatically just sent emails to the road supervisors, and they were able to fix stuff or send graders here and there as they were needed, yeah.
All right. Move on to the next slide of data and information. So we have more level of service line items. Evaluate and recalibrate your level of service data. That's an ongoing thing. As more and more data is collected, as your asset condition is improved, level of service will change. Consistently updating it. The timeline of that is what you would deem consistent. Annually is, I think, standard based on just changes and upgrades and maintenance to your asset networks. Next up, we have evaluate and recalibrate level of service data for other asset types. So you can see that there are a lot of line items for level of service in this roadmap. It will be a goal for over the next year, next 2 years, to set these levels of service, and then start collecting data on them. And then right at the bottom there, I do want to note, as data is collected, you're going to be able to start connecting these to your financial information, making more educated recommendations based on what asset network needs more budget this year versus another. And you're going to be able to delegate and make these decisions with real tangible data rather than just estimates and historical values.
One other thing. We'll go back to this road that has 200
Right.
feet of bad road in it. And if our crews go and fix it, is that captured, that they fixed that at a certain section? And how much did it cost to fix it?
It can be captured.
And currently, we're not capturing that.
Well, we need to capture that.
But that's the whole idea of our work order system
Yeah.
that we're developing.
Because quite a few years ago, I asked about a certain section of road and nobody had any idea how much it cost to fix that road.
And historically is that information was never tracked. You just went out and repaired it, right? So nobody knew the cost of the culvert, nobody knew how many loads of gravel, et cetera, to do that work. We're now developing a work order, so when our crews go out, it's now adding a requirement to say, okay, let's track all this information. How much manpower, what equipment was used, what materials were used, right? And location and.
What I'm getting at is if we're tracking and we can fix that same section of road every year for 5 years, and it costs X amount of dollars, was that a bad investment? Should we have ripped the road up and replaced it?
And with data collection, you're gonna be able to make decisions like that. Why is that road being replaced every year? You're gonna be able to find root causes of these problems and address those rather than dealing with the consequences of replacing that road every year, right? Yeah.
So if this work order system is in place and you spend, let's say, $100,000 on a section of that infrastructure, how does that reflect then? Is it automatically put into our valuation system, so there's a depreciation piece that goes with that, and then extend the life cycle? Is that kind of how this works?
For the life cycle updates, it'll be an email to our support team and we can do a manual update across, if it's every quarter, you can do it every quarter. I do know that Waterloo does it biannually, every March and every September. They update all of their numbers, make sure everyone's going with the same numbers, and they do it that way. With the tracking, it'll just be with historical data. I'm not very familiar with Service Tracker, but there is a work order system in place right now, and it's just not being utilized to the fullest it can be. And there is a line item in the roadmap to make sure that it's going to be utilized and make sure that it's becoming, a part of when I repair a road, I do 1, 2, 3. Now it's the third item to make sure that everything is tracked. Starting that culture and making sure that's something that has to be done, just the same as lacing up your work boots in the morning, should be a part of the method, right? Any other questions for this right now? Okay. Moving on to planning and decision-making. So having some plans for assets in the asset management plan, and some ideas for them, versus having an asset management plan with incorporated risk and level of service.
Before you switch, Bruce, so just so you guys are aware, what he's reading off of here, these are things that were pulled directly from the FCM readiness scale. So when they start at level 1 and go to level 5, so he's pulling them right out, yeah.
Yeah.
Just,
The top is level 1, the bottom's level 5.
Nope,
No.
the top is any level that you've already passed or a previous level.
Oh, okay.
And the bottom is where we're aiming to be within this 3-year roadmap. I think
3.5.
Woodlands County right now is around 2 and 2.5, which is the highest score I've ever seen. And we're aiming to have 3 and 3.5 by the end of the 3-year roadmap, and then hopefully 2 or 4, which is just maintaining a good program at that point, within 5 years. So that is the goal. Many places I've seen are at pre-1 and at best. So being at 2 and that 2.5 range is a great thing, that I haven't seen before. So moving here, you have all these different line items in terms of the planning and decision making. We can start to see that risk is captured. Sorry, no, that's me. So starting to incorporate risks, what threats do your asset types have in terms of disruptions of level of service, threats to the physical asset, what's going to deteriorate faster than the expected rate. Finding out these threats, incorporating them, and addressing them is a goal within the next year for your critical assets and the other asset types. And then you can see here, starting to document operation and maintenance documents, formalizing them, compiling them into one database for a resource pool for anyone to reference or use. The asset management group thinks that it's something that is essential. I also agree that it is essential. Being able to standardize the way things are done can help create stability for replacements as well. Maintenance costs can be stabilized. It costs the same amount to replace a water valve every single time versus if somebody has a trick up their sleeve that they know that no one else knows. Ideally, that information is going to be shared and everyone's going to know about it and the best way to go about any of the public works operations. And then the last item here, this is one that is unique, that isn't on the FCM readiness scale, but I think is a great line item to go over. And that's designing and ranking prioritization system for capital projects. Some projects are going to take priority over others and are going to provide much more value in terms of what they're going to provide for your networks and your ratepayers. And being able to even loosely have a ranking system of which ones should take priority, which ones are going to have the best return on investment, is something that's going to really supplement future budget decisions. And then the last one here, contributions to asset management practice. So what do we have here? Yes, I can read. Yeah. This one. So many smaller municipalities are losing knowledge in the minds of staff as staff turnover, retirement, things like that. Being able to document that, we touched on it a little bit already, making sure all of that is formalized and everyone has access to it, even admin staff, to why does this cost this much in operations maintenance? They're able to look exactly why it costs that much, and having that, breaking down the information silos and making sure everyone's on the same page on why everyone is doing a certain thing. So Woodlands County is aiming to have, collecting and maintaining asset management resources and pool them with the asset management policies and create a work culture and revamping the work order system. So you can see it here as a line item on the roadmap to revamp the work order system. I think this is a great tool. I think almost no one has a really good work order system that works for them because it does save so much time and so much manpower if information is taken right from the field and inputted right into the database. And it's the most accurate information possible without any loss of any information. So if this is being utilized at the best of its ability, I think it's gonna be a great step in the right direction. And it's gonna be able to provide so much information for you as a council and to make decisions moving forward. So that is all I had for the roadmap. There is a visual roadmap past this, not just line items and who's responsible, but in terms of the year, when things start to come into play, how long things are supposed to go, if it continues into the future, or if it's an ongoing item that should exist indefinitely. There's lots of them here. I went through all of them. But they're all in the documentation. I do want to mention that all of these opportunities are based on staff resources. Ideally, if money wasn't real and we all got to do exactly what we wanted to do, these would all work out within the next 3 years, but prioritization is the main thing, and what is most important should be addressed first. That is all I had for you today. Did you have any more questions for me? Anything on the roadmap that you wanted to touch on again? There will be updates made as priorities change, not weekly or anything. Please don't tell Carito to email me weekly with changes. But on an annual basis, biannual basis, we're here to assist you and make your program right for you, not right for everyone else, right? So I'm excited to work closely with you. I'm excited to see where the program can go, and yeah, next steps. Because it is one of the most robust asset management programs I've seen. It's on par with like Regina and Waterloo in Ontario. They're around the same level of starting to integrate work order systems and level of service and risk for their asset networks. So being on par with that is no small feat, and I think you should commend yourself for it. And the asset management group is doing a great job, and it's only possible with council support, right?
So the one thing that I just want to, while we've got you here, and that I think some of the questions that you're hearing from council is just to make sure that the information that we think is related to some of the problems we're seeing in the infrastructure, like that small section of road, for example, you drive the same 20 kilometers at the same 500 feet, just makes you boil every day you go by it. That's the part that everybody's upset about. So we're trying to make sure that is captured. And I think the system is capable of doing it. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation. But I think the one thing that I want to ask while you're here is the implementation of this system going to allow us to provide a better, more reliable service level to residents, and is it going to save us money in the long run as a municipality?
I think it will. I think with the work order system, you're going to be able to address higher concern problems easier and keep track of historical data. Like I said, you're going to be able to address root causes rather than addressing the outcomes of those causes. And I think having more public conversation is going to be a resource that can supplement that as well. At the lowest level, Joe from Tim Hortons is complaining about a pothole every day, and being able to address that starts with documentation with the public works staff. If they're able to keep track of everything that they change and maintain, you're going to see exactly where your problems are fixed from and where they're arising from, and start building historical data that isn't there before.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I just want to say good job. Excellent presentation.
Thank you. Would rather stood up and, be taller than everyone, but thank you for having me. It was my pleasure being here. I'm very excited to see how the program can grow and just what fruits can be born for Woodlands County. But it is one of the best asset management programs I've seen, and I get the pleasure to be a part of. So round of applause for you. Thank you from me.
Well, part of one of our strategic goals is to be a leader, right? And that if we can be a leader in this, one of this specifically, but I think it's a good good thing that we can show other municipalities the value in it, especially long-term with
Right.
savings and decrease in complaints, et cetera, et cetera.
One of the things that I see here as well is that it's very difficult for us to have any kind of public engagement without the information that supports the direction that we want to take as a council. And I think that this is the beginning of a place where we can start to reestablish some of the confidence in our residents that we're trying to do the best job possible. I really appreciate the work that's been put in here, so.
There are solutions down the line where you can have citizen-facing apps where they can report an issue or anything like that. I know another solution that we have at Catalyst, it's a different product, but it's a citizen-facing branded app where you can have specifically a work or report an issue tool, and then 8 other possible buttons on it to hyperlink to, mayor or council minutes or bus routes or bike routes, upcoming events, things like that, calendars. But the main point of the app is to let citizens report an issue and then have it in your database, right? This might be something that you might look for into the future once you're ready for that level of public information, because it can be a lot if you don't have a system in place to intake that level of information. But I think moving towards that goal is, even just hearing it from you is a very positive thing.
Is that an add-on to Service Tracker?
It's Kueller. It's enterprise, so it's work order system that's specifically for larger municipalities, but I think it can be scaled. I want it to be scaled because I think it's much more integrated than Service Tracker, and that has the functionality of the citizen-facing app. I'm not sure if that app can be standalone on its own. I will link into it for you, because I think if that is something you're interested in, that could be a possibility, maybe even for the next year. Yeah, I'll definitely look into what that app can do, and if it can stand alone, that can be something that we can explore for the future.
Okay. Thank you.
Motion?
Go ahead.
Motion that Governance and Priorities Committee direct administration forward Woodlands County Asset Management Roadmap to council for their endorsement.
Thank you. Any discussion on that? All in favor? That's carried.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks very much.
Of course, thank you for your time.
Let's take a 5-minute break real quick.